Part 1. The Vein of Poison. The sterile white glow of the phone screen was a surgical light, exposing a hidden malignancy. Dr. Ava Riley stood in the opulent foyer of their newly bought, meticulously staged dream home, clutching her medical school diploma like a useless scroll. Outside, the world was waiting for her, the brilliant future, the successful surgeon, the wife who had it all. Inside, her world was already cauterized. 12 hours. That was the window. 12 hours until the final closing on the house, 24 hours after her triumphant graduation speech. The clock was ticking not on a deadline, but on the detonation of a truth she had buried for years. Ethan Riley, her husband, was the epitome of tragic, dark beauty, a man whose charm was a shield over deep, jagged scars. His past was a public dossier of trauma, physical, emotional, and the sickening, years-long sexual abuse by a teacher starting when he was barely 16. He was her first serious love, she, his first healthy relationship. But healthy was a lie built on silence and deleted messages. Ava hadn't meant to snoop. The urge was a sudden, chilling psychic cramp, a muscle memory of pain from years ago, the time he met his ex without her permission. The time she found the Sex Panther apps he downloaded, but claimed never to use. This time, it was a work colleague named Kayla. He had sworn the texts were playful banter, overly friendly, nothing sexual. But he had deleted them. That omission was the bullet. Using a forensic data recovery tool she'd learned about in a documentary, Ava had spent the night before her graduation silently resurrecting the digital ghosts. The texts of treason. Kayla, you're my only friend in this city, Ethan. My biggest fan of you. When are you finally going to teach me that court maneuver? Ethan, you're a natural already. We need a private session. I'll bring the supplies. Kayla, seriously. I'm craving the good stuff. Stop being distant. Come over this weekend. We can finally hang. Ethan, you know I can't. But maybe I can make a discreet delivery. For a friend. The supplies and good stuff could only mean one thing: marijuana. Not explicitly sex, but a transaction cloaked in secrecy, a clear crossing of the boundary he had already failed to maintain years earlier. He was offering a private meetup, an entry point into a hidden life, while Ava was busy securing their public future. Ava slammed the phone onto the granite counter. The house, all 3,000 square feet of gleaming, pristine deception, seemed to mock her. The timing was a masterpiece of cruelty. The medical school graduation, the house closing, the pinnacle of her achievement, tainted by the lowest form of dishonesty. When Ethan walked in, his eyes wide with forced optimism, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She held up the phone. The truth, Ethan. The full, disgusting truth. Right now, or I walk away from the closing and I walk away from you. Forever. The confession was agonizingly slow. Yes, he flirted. Yes, he deleted the texts to hide his guilt. Yes, he used the marijuana offer as a way to dry up the conversation and introduce Ava, thinking the presence of his wife would get the memo to Kayla. A pathetic, desperate manipulation. He admitted the pattern was always the same: dishonesty, poor boundaries, and a desperate desire for validation. It was selfish, Ava. Every time. It was a self-soothing act to quiet the noise inside me. A noise that screamed I wasn't enough, he whispered, the words ragged. The noise, she knew, came from his haunted past, the years of systemic abuse and the guilt from his own past cruelties, like abandoning his ex during her abortion in 2018. His current remorse was intense, almost performative. As the sun rose, casting blood-orange shadows across the new hardwood floors, Ava made her decision. Not to leave, not yet, but to fight. She was a doctor. She would diagnose and treat the disease in their marriage. The reconciliation, however, would be on her terms. She demanded intensive individual counseling and immediate marriage counseling. She demanded an open phone policy. She demanded a full, unfiltered confession of every transgression she didn't know about. Ethan nodded, desperate, agreeing to everything. He had only started to listen when she was thoroughly broken and ready to walk, and that fact, that agonizing delay, fueled her resentment. As they walked out the door to finalize the house closing, she stopped him. "You think this is over? This is just the beginning of the surgery, Ethan. And I'm going in deep." Later that night, while Ethan was in his first emergency therapy session, Ava returned to his digital past. She found a faint, nearly erased file from the time of his 2018 Sex Panther phase. It was a financial record tied to an anonymous offshore account. Hidden deep in the metadata, not a message but a manually typed annotation. She zoomed in on the file's properties. The annotated text was not written by Ethan. It was a digital fingerprint left by someone else, someone who knew his secrets. The terrifying sentence, stark against the financial data, made her blood run cold. "The debt is not yet paid. Jay is watching." Who was Jay? And what debt could possibly be greater than the destruction of their marriage? Part 2. The Architect of Anxiety. The closing papers were signed. Ava and Ethan Riley were now owners of a beautiful lie. The ink was barely dry, but the house felt less like a home and more like an isolation ward for their dying marriage. Ava watched Ethan, his remorse a constant, heavy atmosphere in the new, empty rooms. He was compliant, almost disturbingly so. He gave her his passwords, installed tracking software, and even provided a detailed log of every recent work conversation with a woman. "It's not enough, Ethan," Ava stated, her voice flat, clinical. She sat opposite him in the marriage counselor's office, a room that smelled faintly of sterile desperation. "You've admitted the pattern: dishonesty, poor boundaries, need for validation. But why? Why does the urge to self-destruct always hit at the moment of our greatest success?" Ethan's gaze drifted to the floor. His therapist, Dr. Lenore, gently prodded. "Ethan, your past abuse, the grooming, the physical neglect. How does that trauma relate to seeking external validation now?" The truth finally surfaced, thick and poisoned. Ethan revealed that every time he was about to achieve a major goal, like his promotion, Ava's graduation, or the house closing, the underlying shame of his trauma would spike. He felt like a fraud, undeserving of the happiness. "It's a form of self-sabotage," he admitted, his voice barely a rasp. "The flirting, the apps, it was a way to punish myself. A way to prove I was still the broken black sheep, the one who deserves to lose everything." Ava watched him, her scientific mind cataloging the symptoms. His infidelity wasn't about sex or love. It was a psychological defense mechanism, a grenade he threw into his own happiness. But that didn't lessen the damage. Her resentment grew, a cold parasite feeding on her sanity. Days turned into a grueling routine of therapy, work, and digital surveillance. Ava meticulously combed through his old financial records again, searching for more than just the Sex Panther traces. She found a faint, recurring pattern of small, untraceable cash deposits from 2018 to the present. Always exactly $500, always on the anniversary of his abuse starting. "What are these deposits, Ethan?" she asked, presenting the cold, hard numbers. He immediately went pale, his facade of remorse shattering. It's nothing. An old debt. For the old apartment." A lie. A clumsy, obvious lie that told Ava everything she needed to know. Something dark was still hidden. Her surgical focus narrowed. She went back to the cryptic note she found in the metadata. "The debt is not yet paid. Jay is watching." The coincidence of the anniversary deposits and the debt warning was too precise. Jay must be the key. And the most traumatic figure in his life with the initial J was his former abuser, James. Later that evening, while Ethan was sleeping, Ava accessed a rarely used email account he'd set up years ago, ostensibly for junk mail. She hadn't searched it before because he had told her he lost the password. But Ava was a master of diagnosis and pattern recognition. She used a variation of his first dog's name and their wedding year. It worked. The inbox was full of spam, except for 2 drafts, both unsent, both written recently, within hours of his last flirting incident with Kayla. The first was a terrified rant about his life falling apart, but the second, addressed to an unknown email, James_the_truth@hiddenmail.com, was chillingly direct. Ava's hand trembled as she read the subject line and the single, desperate body sentence. It confirmed her darkest suspicion, tying Ethan's past terror directly to his current betrayal. Subject: "The vow is broken." Body: "It's happening again. Stop. I cannot lose her over this. It's happening again." James was actively trying to re-enter Ethan's life. The flirting and the supplies weren't just self-sabotage. They were a frantic, desperate reaction to a ghost that had just walked back into the room. Ethan wasn't just lying to Ava, he was being threatened. Part 3. The Unthinkable Condition. Ava did not sleep. She sat on the cold granite counter, the phantom blue light of the phone screen reflecting in her eyes. The 2 facts, Ethan's desperate self-sabotage and the chilling external threat from James, had finally merged. Ethan wasn't just a serial betrayer. He was a terrified victim being blackmailed, and his flirting with Kayla was a panicked, subconscious cry for help or a self-inflicted wound to preempt the inevitable collapse. This knowledge was a fragile shield. It protected her from utter despair, but it fueled a cold, surgical rage. She still loved the broken man beneath the trauma, but her resentment was a roaring fire. He had only committed to change when she was thoroughly broken and ready to walk, and that was unforgivable. The reconciliation could not be a simple handshake. It had to be a conquest. The next morning, Ava presented the evidence, the James_the_truth@hiddenmail.com draft, the subject line, and the pattern of the $500 anniversary deposits. Ethan's practiced remorse instantly crumbled into raw, animal fear. "He's found me, Ava. After all these years. James, he knows everything. My job, my past business, everything," Ethan choked out, finally admitting that the ex-teacher and abuser, James, was indeed the source of his terror, using their traumatic past as leverage. The small cash deposits were small, fearful tributes he'd been making to keep James silent, a desperate attempt at peace. "Silence bought with lies," Ava murmured, her voice like grinding ice. "I am done with your lies, Ethan. I am done with your inability to set boundaries. I am done being the collateral damage of your trauma." Ava knew she couldn't heal him simply through therapy and open communication. To truly conquer the trauma that infected their marriage, she had to demand a total, surgical severance from everything that made Ethan vulnerable to James and his own self-destructive patterns. She had to ensure that the cost of his next transgression would be absolutely unbearable. In the sterile, unforgiving light of their new living room, Ava laid out her unthinkable condition. "You call this a clean slate, Ethan? We need to sanitize the entire board. This is my ultimatum. You have 48 hours to execute it. If you hesitate, I will annul the house closing, take my diploma, and you will never see me again." She presented 2 legal documents, meticulously drafted by her family lawyer that morning. Condition 1. The surgical severance. You will write a formal, notarized statement severing all ties with your immediate family. All of them. Your parents, your sister, everyone. They represent the emotional isolation and chaos that made you James's easy target. You cut them out. Permanently. The black sheep becomes the exiled. Ethan's face went white. He was close to his sister. She was his only real, healthy family connection. Ava, my sister. She's the only one who ever fought for me. She is a lifeline that James could potentially use. Cut it. If you are truly committed to me, I am your only family now. Choose. Condition 2. The ultimate control. You will sign over full ownership of this house and all of your significant financial assets into a revocable trust, the Ava Riley Trust. I will be the sole trustee. I will control every dime. If you stray, 1 suspicious text, 1 deleted message, 1 lie, I can dissolve the trust and liquidate every asset. You walk away with nothing but your clothes and your guilt. Your security, your status, your entire financial future is entirely dependent on my unwavering trust. It is my sweet revenge, Ethan, and my undeniable safety net. This was not reconciliation. It was domination. It was a massive, non-negotiable task that forced him to physically sacrifice his freedom and security to prove his intent. The demand was so huge, so absolute, it stunned Ethan into complete obedience. He saw the cold logic in her madness. "I'll do it," he whispered, the sound broken. "But Ava, what do we do about Kayla?" She was flirting, but Kayla is no longer your problem. She is mine. Ava cut him off. Ava was a doctor of diagnosis, and she had spent the day treating the obvious symptom, Ethan's trauma, while simultaneously studying the new viral agent, Kayla. She noticed a sophisticated pattern in Kayla's initial work-related web conference messages, a form of professional code she recognized from her medical school's intellectual property law seminars. Kayla wasn't just a lonely coworker. She was too persistent, too smooth, and her interest in Ethan's work was too specific. Ava realized the truth. Kayla wasn't after a husband. She was after confidential corporate data, likely working for a competitor. The flirtation, the supplies request, it was all a subtle, professional manipulation to exploit a known victim of trauma. Ava initiated her own surveillance. She used the new house's proximity to their corporate headquarters and her own network of contacts from her husband's social media. She discovered that Kayla wasn't even working in the city in March, as she claimed. She had been hired 6 weeks ago by a competing pharmaceutical firm specializing in a niche market that directly overlapped with Ethan's R&D department. Kayla was a professional predator. Ava drove to a quiet corner near the competing firm's office. She waited. Finally, she saw Kayla emerge, not in office attire, but in sleek, expensive clothes, meeting a man in a discreet black car. The man was older, impeccably dressed, and possessed a chilling, authoritarian air. Ava snapped several photos using the high-zoom camera on her new phone. Later, running facial recognition on the man, Ava uncovered a shocking piece of information. The man was not a colleague. He was a high-profile corporate lawyer known for aggressively defending individuals involved in intellectual property theft. A lawyer who had worked for James's family in a civil suit years ago. Ava rushed home, the photos clutched in her hand. Ethan was sitting at the table, his head in his hands, 2 signed documents, the severance letter and the trust agreement, lying before him. He had completed the unthinkable condition. But the price of safety had immediately brought them closer to danger. I signed them, Ava. The trust is in your name. I'm yours, completely, Ethan said, a devastating finality in his voice. But you need to know this. I received a cryptic text just moments after the notary left. He held out his phone. The message was from an encrypted number, the sender anonymous, but the tone unmistakable. It was from James. Tell Ava she made a mistake. The house is the least of her worries. I always collect my debts. The transfer of the house had triggered James. Ava's attempt to protect herself had only brought the predator directly to their new doorstep. Their marriage was no longer a personal tragedy. It was a battleground. Part 4. The Ghost of the Past. The cryptic text from James, tell Ava she made a mistake. The house is the least of her worries. I always collect my debts. Was not a threat. It was a promise of chaos. Ava had used her clinical mind to create a shield, but the act of taking control had alerted the predator. Their marriage was not just recovering, it was at war. Ava forced herself to remain calm. He knows about the house because of the trust, Ethan. James must have some financial monitoring network. This confirms he is using his wealth and connections to keep you trapped. Ethan was broken. He had followed her command, cutting off his sister and signing away his security. His remorse was now fused with raw fear, making him completely dependent on Ava, exactly where she needed him to be to fight. You did the right thing, Ethan. You burned the past. Now we neutralize the threat, Ava said, the surgeon's focus back in her eyes. We need to understand the debt. And we need to prove Kayla is part of James's scheme. They started working as a single, desperate unit. Ava used her medical school connections, specifically a friend in forensic accounting, to dive deeper into James's public records, searching for anything tied to the lawyer she'd photographed meeting Kayla. Ethan, meanwhile, used his open phone policy to set a deliberate, clinical trap for Kayla. He sent her a carefully worded, vague email about an upcoming, major change in company's strategy that would affect the R&D projects they had briefly discussed. It was bait, confidential enough to be tempting, yet vague enough to be harmless. Within hours, Kayla responded. Not through WebEx, but through an encrypted, disposable chat app. She didn't flirt. She went straight to business. She asked for specific, technical details, offering an opportunity for a consultation that pays extremely well. Off the books. The smoking gun. Kayla was indeed a professional agent, confirming Ava's suspicion. Ava then confronted Ethan with the photos and the lawyer's identity. That man is tied to James's past civil litigation. Kayla is not a romantic rival, Ethan. She is an industrial spy hired by James to sabotage your career and discredit you, probably using the past marijuana sales as leverage against your firm. The revelation was a sickening wave of relief and horror. Ethan's humiliation was replaced by clarity. His infidelity was not just a personal failure. It was a geopolitical move in a corporate war orchestrated by his abuser. During his next individual therapy session with Dr. Lenore, Ethan finally broke through his trauma wall. He spoke the name James, the man who had groomed and destroyed him, out loud for the first time in years. The sound of the name triggered a massive, violent panic attack. When he recovered, he confessed the full truth. James had not been a quiet ghost. He had been sending vague, threatening messages for months, subtly tying the release of old, fabricated evidence of financial misconduct, related to the marijuana sales and offshore accounts, to Ethan's recent successes. The blackmail was designed to ensure Ethan would never escape his control. He said the trust was a declaration of war, Ethan rasped, his eyes haunted. He said he knows I'm trying to escape. And he told me he knows where my sister works. That's why I cut her off, Ava. I didn't want him to use her. The unthinkable condition had been a desperate, loving act of protection, disguised as revenge. Ava felt a sudden, powerful shift in her perception. Her resentment, though still present, was overwhelmed by a fierce sense of alliance. They were united against a common enemy. Later that day, a package arrived at their new home. It was a manila envelope, unmarked, slipped through the mail slot. Ava opened it with surgical caution. Inside was a single, professionally printed card. The text was elegant, the message utterly terrifying. It was a formal invitation, styled like a wedding announcement, but chillingly perverse. The James K. Caldwell Foundation cordially invites Ethan Riley to a private consultation. Topic: settling old accounts. Location: the Serenity Peaks Mental Health Clinic, confidential wing. Date: Friday at midnight. RSVP is mandatory. Your presence alone will secure the future of your wife's dream home. Below the text, a handwritten note was added in looping, familiar script. Bring the trust documents. And bring your wife. You need her to see this, Ethan. You need her to know the real secret. The address: the Serenity Peaks Clinic, was the very same private facility Ava had seen in the anonymous photos. James was luring them into his domain. But the final line chilled her to the core. The real secret. What hidden betrayal had Ethan still not confessed? Part 5. The Calculated Collapse. The invitation was a poisoned chalice. James was daring them to enter his domain, confirming that the new house, the symbol of Ava's victory and Ethan's commitment, was merely bait. The Serenity Peaks Mental Health Clinic wasn't a place of healing. It was James's fortress. We go, Ava stated, her voice sharp, bypassing any discussion of fear. He wants us to bring the trust documents. He wants to see the look on my face when he explains why my safety net is useless. We won't give him that satisfaction. We use his ego against him. For the first time since their reconciliation began, Ethan looked at Ava not with remorse, but with respect. You're the surgeon, Ava. Tell me the procedure. This is not therapy. This is counter-blackmail. We have proof that Kayla is a corporate spy, and we know James's lawyer is connected. Our ultimate goal isn't just to save our marriage, it's to destroy James's ability to ever touch you again. Their strategy was a surgical plan in 3 phases: diagnosis, infiltration, and neutralization. Phase 1. Diagnosis. Ava used her forensic accounting contact to cross-reference James Caldwell's financial records with the small $500 deposits Ethan had been making. They discovered James had been secretly setting up a legal defense fund using small, untraceable deposits linked to his own family's old, defunct shell corporation. The $500 was not a tribute. It was Ethan's money being laundered to pay for James's future legal fees. More chillingly, the contact discovered that James, the abuser, was the primary donor to a prominent victims of sexual trauma charity, a cynical facade designed to give him public immunity. Phase 2. Infiltration. Ava realized that James's invitation was a trap, but also an opportunity. He wanted Ethan to arrive broken and alone. They would subvert this. Ethan would go in alone, but he would be wired. Ava reached out to a former med school peer who now worked in high-tech medical device security, securing a tiny, state-of-the-art surveillance pin disguised as a lapel mic. "You are going to provoke him, Ethan," Ava instructed, her hand steady as she secured the device to his jacket. "We need him to confess his intent, his blackmail, and his connection to Kayla. You will use the trust against him. Tell him I took everything to protect you, and that made him powerless." Phase 3. The Hidden Truth. Before Ethan left, Ava looked at the invitation one last time. "You need her to see this, Ethan. You need her to know the real secret." "Ethan," Ava said, her voice soft but absolute. "I know everything about your past with James, the apps, the lies, the self-sabotage. But that phrase, the real secret, terrifies me. What is it? What didn't you tell me in the hours of conversation, the therapy, the confessions?" Ethan collapsed back into the chair, tears streaming down his face, his last wall falling. "It was the ex," he whispered, referring to the first instance of infidelity years ago. "I told you she reached out for advice, and I went without your permission. That was a lie. We slept together. Once. It was years ago, but when James started talking about collecting my debts, I thought he knew about that too. That's the one thing I kept from you. The one true act of physical infidelity." The revelation hit Ava like a physical blow. The resurgence of her initial, searing resentment threatened to consume her. He had kept the most profound betrayal, the truth of his only physical infidelity, hidden until the absolute final hour. He had allowed her to build their fragile peace on a lie. But there was no time for anger. The clock had run out. Ava stood up, taking a deep, surgical breath. "Thank you for the truth, Ethan. The full, disgusting truth. Now go. And get us justice." Ava watched him drive away to Serenity Peaks. She immediately contacted her legal and police contacts, feeding them the cross-referenced financial data, the information on Kayla, and the address of the clinic. She was not waiting for an emergency call. She was initiating the calculated collapse. As Ava waited, watching the surveillance feed on her laptop, a final text arrived. It was from Ethan, sent just before he entered the clinic's confidential wing. It wasn't about the plan. "I have to take this risk to save my soul, Ava. But James said he had one last gift for us. He said he would tell us exactly who set him on me years ago. He said the person who orchestrated the first blackmail attempt was not one of his associates. It was family. He named a specific person." The name flashed across the screen. Ava gasped, grabbing the edge of the granite counter. It was Ethan's sister. The one person he was close to. The one person he had sacrificed for Ava. Was she a victim, or the ultimate architect of his lifelong downfall? Part 6. The Bittersweet Triumph. The clinic was a gilded cage, silent and foreboding. Ethan walked into the private consultation room, his face a mask of calculated despair. The small lapel mic a pinprick of rebellion against the vastness of the betrayal. He carried the Ava Riley trust documents like a shield. James Caldwell sat waiting, a handsome, aging man whose casual authority made him sickeningly familiar. He didn't rise. "Ethan, you brought the paperwork. And you brought the new money. Dr. Riley. I'm touched." Ethan played his role, his voice trembling with manufactured defeat. "She took everything, James. The house, my savings. My entire future depends on her. You won. Not entirely, James purred. I came to collect two things, your soul, and the confirmation that my influence is stronger than her love. But I'm generous. I have a gift for your highly motivated wife. The real secret. James leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial level, perfectly captured by Ava's hidden microphone. You've been so focused on me, Dr. Riley, you never asked who started the game. Who told me about the Sex Panther apps? Who gave me the tip about the old offshore account you used for your little side business? It wasn't me, Ethan. I was merely the collector. Ethan, following Ava's exact instruction, let his voice break. Who? You promised me the name, James. Your sister, Ethan. Sarah. The name was a shockwave. Ethan's one clean connection, the only one who fought for him, revealed as the original betrayer. James smiled, relishing the chaos. She was tired of being the only one holding the family name together, while you got a happy ending. A simple anonymous call 5 years ago. Just a little nudge. She made you vulnerable. I just kept the pressure on. James reached for the trust documents. Now, sign these over to my legal fund. I will then personally ensure your wife finds out about your little tryst with your ex, the one you actually slept with. Your bitter victory will become a public scandal. This was Ava's cue. She didn't wait for the police. She was already in her car, speeding toward the clinic, her phone transmitting the audio feed to the authorities. She slammed the brakes outside the clinic entrance, throwing open the car door. She burst into the consultation room, her white silk blouse sharp against the clinic's muted decor. She didn't look at James. Her eyes were locked on Ethan. You're wrong, James, Ava said, her voice clear and ringing. You are not the collector. You are the disease, and I am the cure. She held up her phone, the audio of James's confession of blackmail and Sarah's betrayal clearly still recording. I have your admission of industrial espionage through your agent, Kayla, and I have your confession of using a trauma victim for financial gain. I also have evidence that your charity fund is merely a laundering operation for your legal fees. James's smile froze. He lunged for the microphone on Ethan's lapel. It was too late. Police sirens wailed outside. Ava had used her network, leveraging the corporate espionage angle to ensure federal-level urgency. James was arrested, his authoritarian veneer collapsing into panicked screams as he was led away. His entire operation, the blackmail, Kayla, the shell corporations, collapsed in a single, calculated implosion. The villains were punished. Ethan stood there, free, but utterly devastated by the truth about his sister. Sarah. She did this to me. All of it. She was broken, Ethan. Just like you were, Ava said, walking to him. She gently removed the microphone pin, signaling the end of the surveillance. She made a desperate, selfish choice. And you, Ethan, made selfish choices every time you lied to me. But today, you made a choice to face the ghost and tell the full, terrifying truth about your ex. You chose transparency over survival. That is the final stage of healing. The bittersweet triumph. Days later, the dust settled. Kayla was fired and facing civil suits from Ethan's firm. James Caldwell was in custody. Ethan had achieved the freedom he craved, but the cost was absolute, complete, permanent severance from his past, including his sister. The wicked were punished, and the hero was rewarded, but the victory was bittersweet. Ava stood on the balcony of their house. She had the house, the money, and the power of the trust. She had secured their future, but she had lost the illusion of a perfect, easy marriage. Their love would forever be a mosaic of broken glass, cemented by a shared battle. She used her power, transferring the entirety of the trust's funds, the house equity and Ethan's assets, into the Riley Family Trauma Scholarship Fund, a foundation dedicated to helping medical students who have overcome severe abuse. The money was now secured not by her resentment, but by a shared purpose. Ethan found her there. He was quiet, free from the crushing weight of decades of secrets. He no longer had a sister or a clean past, but he had his soul. He turned to Ava with a smile, free from the guilt and performative remorse she had always seen before. It was a raw, genuine smile of survival. He reached out and gently took her hand. "I gave you the house, Ava," Ethan whispered, his voice steady. "But you gave me back my soul. We start over. Not healthy, not perfect, but honest." Ava didn't reply with words. She squeezed his hand, acknowledging the scar they both now shared. The bittersweet triumph was complete. Justice had prevailed, the villains were punished, and the heroes were awarded a damaged, but finally honest, future.